another edition of Hold My Cutter. We're coming away from Burn by Rocky Patel, just a few blocks down from PNC Park on the North Shore. And as always, we have a featured smoke of the week, and this is the Gold Label. Luxurious Habano wrapper from Ecuador, exudes sophistication from the very first glance, and it makes all the sense in the world because we have a sophisticated man from Carbondale, Illinois, the skipper. Derek Shelton is our guest, and we are so pleased that Derek Shelton would join us on Hold My Cutter. Shelty, I know you've heard all about Hold My Cutter. I mean, it is the talk of the clubhouse.
Yeah, I'm excited. That's the first time sophisticated has ever been used in the same sentence with Derek Shelton, but I will take the Gold Label. This is a nice little cigar right here.
You know, I don't know if you noticed it. It's a little maroon-like label. I think that's maroon, which is the reason we chose it, because it's kind of a Saluki-like color.
Saluki maroon. I appreciate that.
What's a Saluki?
That's the question for the skipper here. Derek Shelton, what is a Saluki?
What is a Saluki?
So a Saluki is the mascot of Southern Illinois University, and what it is it's the oldest breed of dog known to mankind. Wow. It was the Egyptian pharaoh's dogs. So it essentially looks like a greyhound. But yeah, there you see, you learned something. You learned something today.
Well, I played.
I'm sophisticated. Did you not hear? Yeah.
He knows what a Saluki is. That's right. Yeah.
Did you not hear Browning say sophistication?
I now know. I should have known.
That's where we're at.
It's also one of the fastest, one of the top 3 or 4 fastest dogs on earth.
Right, just like a greyhound. I mean, looks. If you saw Saluki and you saw a greyhound side by side, it would be hard to tell, unless you're a graduate of Southern Illinois University.
Yeah. But was it obvious that you were going to go to Southern Illinois, being from Carbondale?
Yeah,
was that
I will tell you a story, Browning. As much time as we spend together, this is going to be an interesting story for you. So both my parents went to school there. They grew up in Southern Illinois. Itchy Jones, the legendary coach, helped my father get his first job. So my kindergarten teacher at one point told a story to my parents that the whole time when she retired, she was a kindergarten teacher for 45 years, she had 2 students tell her from their first day of kindergarten what they were going to do with their life. One of them was me, which was to go to Southern Illinois. So at age 5, I had that high aspirations. And the second one was another kid wanted to be a dentist, and he ended up being a dentist. So
2 for 2.
So yeah, one was a Saluki, one was a dentist.
So you wanted to be a Saluki?
I grew up wanting to be a Saluki. I mean, both my parents went there. All my extended family is from down there. It's really all I kind of knew. And so, yeah, I think wanted to go there, went there, have an education from there. So, yeah.
It's a good baseball school.
Yeah, good baseball school.
It's a really good baseball school.
Yeah. Well, Carbondale's right outside of St. Louis, right?
Yeah, it's about 2 hours from St. Louis. When I was in school, and for a long time, we were known for, we had this Halloween party that may have extended days or weeks at a time that was very legendary. And now and I still don't know if they have it, but they did. As of when I was there, my brother went to school there. They actually shut down the university for that week because it turned into a little bit of a rowdy time. I didn't partake.
No, of course not. No. I'm sure
you're too sophisticated.
100%.
Yeah, that's right.
100%.
Your dad, Ron, by the way, I did not realize. Was he born or grew up in Whittier, California?
No, that's the other Ron Shelton. That's the Ron Shelton that.
But did your dad play ball? He played ball, not organized ball or professional ball.
My dad played. He played for the Orioles.
He did play for the Orioles,
and he played with Ron Shelton, who was born in Whittier, who actually did Bull Durham, White Men Can't Jump. They played on the same professional team together their rookie year.
Same name.
Same name. I heard this story the whole time growing up. Like same name. Stuff used to get mixed up. He was Ron Shelton. The director was a position player. So, yeah, it's and the whole time growing up, it was very strange hearing this. And then, White Men Can't Jump and Bull Durham come out, and it's Ron Shelton, the story, and they start telling. And so my dad actually was able to tell us what's true. So we have, in my parents' den, there is a picture, and you guys will love this being baseball guys. His rookie team was the other Ron Shelton, managed by Joe Altobelli, Bobby Grich, Don Baylor, Johnny Oates. All on the same rookie ball team.
Oh,
man. Terrible team.
How about that? Yeah. A lot of fun.
So you got a Don Baylor tie, don't you, for it?
Yeah, I love Don Baylor. He was my hitting coach when I first got to the big leagues in Colorado. And he was the first guy that said, stop hitting the ball the other way. He gave me a giant B-167
and
said, let it eat, big doggy.
Let's go.
And we became good friends. He could not toss, So he threw it right at my face. So I had to pull everything. I love Don.
I love that.
Yeah, he's
great
a
man.
great dude.
So when I was growing up, because I grew up in the, right between Chicago and Milwaukee, as we've talked about, my dad would call Don Baylor for tickets. This is back when people called for tickets all the time. And Baylor would say, and he would call like the hotel. So I'm not going to say the hotel. We all know the one we stay at in Milwaukee. And Don Baylor would answer and say, is this the movie guy or the teacher guy?
That's great.
And would leave us tickets. And my dad has this great story about one time Baylor brought him into the clubhouse in Milwaukee, Old County Stadium, Brewers, when he was with the Yankees, and Billy Martin and Reggie may have been going at it a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah, so, cool.
Did Dad teach and coach you? Both?
Teach and coach. I mean,
you were in his class?
No, because he was, by the time I was in school, he was the dean of students.
Oh, wow.
So he was in charge of like all discipline.
Oh.
So any of the guys that I went to school with, when they got in trouble, they went to see my dad. And it's so funny. You've been around my dad.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the nicest people alive.
So
like
great.
He's
human being.
I got to meet him a lot.
Yeah. I mean, he knows all the ushers at PNC. I mean, he loves it. He's so soft now, but like when he was hard when I was growing up, and
so he got a lot of practice.
All my friends now are like, dude, what happened to your dad? Like, I say grandkids or what happened. So
fair enough. That's great.
So Shelty, you end up going to Southern Illinois. You play ball, and I know you've kidded about this before, but seriously, you hit 341 in parts of 2 years, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
In the minor leagues. I was just low minors, but still, you did.
I did. So I think I hit better professionally than I did when I was in college.
That's good.
I don't know. I made contact. I mean, I was, maybe the stat guys that like me now, because I swung at strikes. I didn't swing at balls. I didn't hit the ball very hard, but I made a lot of contact, and I was asked to bunt a lot. I was very good.
So you're old school.
I was very good. Yeah, I was
very
very
old
old school. So the people that yell at me all the time right now about bunting, I could do that.
How do you think you were defensively?
I could catch. I could catch and throw a little bit.
Was that your natural position?
Yeah, it was my natural position. I think, my first set of catcher's gear I got when I was 3 years old. So I think my dad saw the body and was like, listen, easiest way to the big leagues is to catch. And, and from doing it, like once you get it, it's like a passion and you love being back there and you're part of every, play in the game. And so, the only reason I was able to play professionally is because I was a catcher. And it was a situation where, I could catch a little bit and understood the game.
At what point did you think about managing? Like, because you're so into the game as a catcher, of course.
Right. You mean managing professionally or managing the big leagues?
Both.
Well, managing professionally, I mean, I was fortunate that when I was playing for the Yankees, there were a lot of good young coaches. Rob Thompson, who I'm very.
Is that who drafted you?
Yeah, the Yankees did.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so I was with Rob Thompson. I was with Gary Denbo, who ran the Marlins for a while with Jeter. Trey Hillman, who managed the Royals. We were all coaches together. They were a few years ahead of me. And Mark Newman, who actually went to Southern Illinois, was running player development for the Yankees at the time. And once I started playing, I realized I wasn't going to be good enough to play in the big leagues. And that's when the love for it. And they were fortunate. They brought me back and then gave me the opportunity. And I tell people all the time, that time being a Yankee coach was like a breeding ground. I mean, I think of the guys that I started coaching with. Well, the two other guys that I started with that year, Tony Perez-Chica is coaching third for the Diamondbacks now. Wow. Arnie Baylor coached first for Boston for a long time when they won the World Series. So, it was a breeding ground for guys that ended up being major league coaches.
And did you at one point play with Jeter?
I did.
Were you on his team?
1993, I played on a team in Greensboro that Derek was on. And it was one of those, you would have loved this team for it. It was all college kids and Derek. So he was the younger brother. He was the 19-year-old.
Did he stand out big time?
He stood out. He was, it was the year he made all the errors. It was the year he made the 56 errors. He was long. He was gangly. But he was athletic as hell. I mean, this doesn't surprise you. You sit around in the minor leagues and, everybody lives in the same apartment complex and you're drinking and hanging out and maybe smoking a cigar or two. And I remember one night vividly, we were like, we're going to tell our kids that we played with this kid. You don't know that he's going to be sixth all time on the hit list or whatever he is, or a first ballot Hall of Famer, but like you knew he was special just the way that he handled himself. And I think that one of the coolest things is having coached in the big leagues for a long time in the American League East. He was there. I got to see him last year at the All-Star games. First time I had seen him in a while.
Wow.
Same guy, just never
That's
changed.
awesome.
And I think it's why he is who he is.
So one of the things we do on Hold My Cutters, you're aware, Shelty, we smoke cigars, great cigars here at Burn by
Yes.
Rocky Patel. We have we had Bob Walk on here earlier episode, and he talked about the great coffee they have and these wonderful
Yeah,
pirate
this
mugs.
coffee is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's got good coffee.
Where
Delicious.
are the beans from?
I don't know that.
I think mine are from somewhere
Ecuador.
in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Kentucky,
There you go.
Kentucky
I
beans,
think I have
coffee
a
beans.
Kentucky.
But we also, of course, talk baseball. We talk many Pittsburghers, Western Pennsylvanians. What is it about the game of baseball that you think drew you? Was it your father that brought you to baseball and the love and the passion that you have for it? What separates it from other sports?
I think that it was my dad. You know, it was the sport he played. He was a high school coach. And, you know, now kids grow up and they go to daycare, they go wherever after school. I mean, we got out of school because I grew up in a small town in Illinois, and my dad was coaching. And so we went to practice, and my brother and I. And, like, we didn't have a babysitter. We didn't have anything else. We went to practice. So we were there with him all the time, whether it was, you know, in the winter he coached basketball. He coached freshman basketball. So we were there, and, you know, we were there at baseball practice, you know, taking ground balls, catching up for fungos, shagging in the outfield. So it was in my blood. I think it's one of the reasons it's so important for me now. Like, we have a lot of coaches that have kids that are at that age. And, you know, some people are like, why you let them in a clubhouse or that? But, like, there's no better experience than being, and I was able to live it with Jackson, my oldest one, just to be in a clubhouse and be around. You learn so much.
But what is
It's
it about
invaluable.
baseball? You think?
It's
What, yeah,
invaluable.
but what separates baseball from the other sports?
I
you
think the strategy of it for me.
It's a
you
smart.
know,
It's a smart. game. I mean, you have to pay attention.
Think. You have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
pay attention. You have
Yeah.
to think. I mean, you know, I know how much you love the American League game and that we all play now. So,
as he said his tongue. If you're watching on YouTube, you know I'm nodding. But if you're listening on some other venue,
I do think it's a
smirking.
disservice to a guy like you that does have really good wits and plays the chess game that doesn't get to be in the National League. Like,
Yeah.
truly in the National
Yeah,
League. Because
I
it
enjoyed
would have
the
been a
National
lot of fun to watch the pieces come together because it's a completely different game.
It's a different game. And I was fortunate. I got 1 year of it because my first year was COVID, and then we went back to the American League game. You know, the hitting coach in me loves it, but the strategist. I mean, the game it's a completely different game. How you go about it, you know, what you think about. I mean, you know, because you played in it for so long. When the pitcher hits, how you use your bullpen. There's just so much more to it that I really enjoyed the year I was able to do it.
does one moment stand out for you in your coaching, managing career? One, I don't know, one good or bad over the years. Well,
We've had a couple over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's all right. But okay, the best moment. Again, it doesn't have to be with the Pirates. Could have been some moment as a hitting coach. And again, for those unaware, you were a longtime hitting coach, and your first big league hitting coach job was Cleveland, and then a longtime Tampa Bay Rays hitting coach, 2 years bench coach with the Minnesota Twins. I'm sorry, Fort.
No, I want to go through that process because I think that's the most intriguing thing because you have been well-versed in so many different areas. It wasn't just gifted to you. You worked your tail off to get where you are. Kind of walk through that process because you said you played for a couple of years. You hit 340. Whoops. And then all of a sudden you're right in. Are you right into coaching?
No, so I spent between my last year of playing, had elbow surgery, was done, was out a year, had talked to some people about getting back in the game, and then the strike in '95. So that was
So it got taken. It felt like it got taken.
So it
away.
got taken away. I had to live in the real world. I worked for a moving and storage company. Actually worked as a mover. Worked then doing sales, which I was terrible at. I mean, absolutely terrible at. Was just fortunate I worked with a bunch of guys on the crew that covered for me because I realized if you bought donuts and beer for them, they would cover
They would help
for
you
it.
out?
Yeah.
Then you were good at it.
Yeah,
You figured out the game.
Yeah, exactly. And then '96, really, no one hired because they were coming off the strike. And in '97, I was fortunate enough, the Yankees hired me back, and was able to do it. So I spent 3 years with the Yankees as a hitting coach, spent 3 years managing, was fortunate that got an opportunity to go to Cleveland as the hitting coordinator. And I really wanted to stay in New York, and it was a situation where we kind of went back and forth. And going to Cleveland was really, I mean, probably the smartest, and got some really good advice. And then 2 years later, a year and a half later, I was in the big leagues. And I was fortunate. I got to the big leagues with a group of players, Victor Martinez, Grady Sizemore, Johnny Peralta, Travis Hafner, guys that I had as minor league players. So it was a natural transition into it. Was fortunate, spent 5 years there, met my wife in Cleveland. She was working on the radio at the time. Got fired, went to Tampa, which is where I live, and spent 7 years there. And then, like I said,
dunk there.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I mean, I can remember I woke up after the end of the season. We ended the season in Boston, in Cleveland in 09, and we had gotten fired with 3 days left. So I can tell you.
You said 5 years as a hitting coach?
Yeah. Well,
that's incredible.
5 years there, yeah.
Oh.
So, and then ended that series in Boston, and as you can imagine, we got fired going into it. So the last night that staff had been together, that next morning was a little rough.
Oh, I got to say.
And I woke up to a call from Joe Madden and Andrew Friedman. They were like, hey, we want to interview you. And I love telling Donnie Kelly this story. We want to interview you for the job in Tampa. Can you do it on whatever day it was, like Thursday? And it was Monday. And Allie was flying back to Tampa. She was 7 months pregnant. I was driving back. So I drove back the entire way, showered, and then went to the interview. Like straight into it. But it was the game that Minnesota and the Tigers played, that epic extra inning game that Donnie Kelly played in.
Oh, my God.
And I remember listening to that. It was the greatest thing. I'd listened to that game for 5 hours on that trip that killed time. So anyway, got there, was in Tampa for 7 years. Went to Toronto for a year that I call my gap year, and that was the year that I really decided I wanted to manage in the big leagues. I had some other hitting coach offers. Allie and I sat down and talked about it. She's like, you would need to branch out. Spent a year there and then 2 years in Minnesota before coming here. So it's been a journey. I've been around a lot of good people. I've learned a lot. Being a hitting coach will definitely harden you.
You mean a psychologist?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what it is. I mean, it hardens you, that job, because there's never a good day. I mean, you have 9 guys.
Somebody went 0 for 5.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Somebody
can say that. And if you care about your job, you worried about the guy that went 0 for 5. You're not worried about the guy that went, you're not worried about Billy Cook today, who got his major league debut and had 2 hits. You're worried about the guy that went 0 for 4 and didn't get a guy over, and that's the conversation you're going to have the next day.
He's swimming at home, and so are you.
Exactly.
It's like you're always on call, as I assume, like a hitting coach. And you've got, these are all your patients, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Every one of them. And there's constant, you want to constantly take care of them. They need care.
They need care. I mean, when I did the job, the first 10 years, and Ford can tell you from playing, like, I had no assistant. I mean, that was back when we had 6.
You guys were by yourself.
6 coaches. So it was 12, 13 guys every day. You're throwing in the cage. You're throwing on the field. You're throwing early work. You're doing post work at times. So it was fun. It does harden you, but the relationships that you have with your hitters is second to none. I mean, you're as protective of them as your kids.
So is it because of that grind that you thought, I want to manage and get away, or did you kind of get the itch as you were going along? You're like,
it's not easier.
No.
But was there a moment where you're like, because I mean, anybody that's ever played the game, you're like, I can do it, right? Was there that moment that you had to, like, man, I've done all this, I've done my time, I think this is my next step, and this is what I think I can do.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that really went into that. The first one was I got fired by the Rays in like September, with like a week into September, day after Labor Day. I got called in and they let me go. They were going to hire Chad Mottola, who was their coordinator, who's still there. He and Kevin Cash had a long relationship. Kevin had inherited me, and at the time you're hurt, whatever, you're angry. About a week and a half later, 2 weeks later, Eric Neander, who now runs the Rays, called me and said, can we go to breakfast? I'm like, you guys just fired me. Like,
Which is really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Kind of weird, but cool.
So I said, yeah. So we go to the Vinoy and have breakfast, and he sits down with me, and he had a long conversation with me about how, like, their organization and their leadership viewed my ability. And he's like, we think you should be a bench coach. We think you should think about like. So it was someone that I really respected, I trusted, someone who had just let me go, but was like, we think you're undervaluing your skill set a little bit here.
That's amazing.
So it was very impactful. Went home, talked to Ali about it. At the time, I had been offered 3 other hitting coach jobs, and then the Toronto offered me the job. We sat down with the kids and said, hey, what do you want to do? And they all wanted to go to Toronto. They're like, that's cool. We're going to go to Toronto. And then I think Ali's the one that was like, listen, if you want to manage, you have to separate yourself from the game. You have to get away from people thinking about you as a hitting coach and let them see the other side of you. And the best thing that happened is the Blue Jays, Mark Shapiro, Ross Atkins, they let me do it because they exposed me to so many things that I had never been exposed to. Relationships with front office, relationships with training staffs, performance staffs. Ben Charrington and I actually worked together there. So it was one of those things that was really impactful and kind of broadened me and actually really prepared me as much as anything for the COVID year, because during the COVID year, everything we did through Zoom, everything was dealing with front offices. And I think that initiation in there, but it was an impactful conversation with Eric Neander, and then my wife kind of pushing me to like, all right,
it's always the wife.
Yeah, you need to go outside your comfort zone here.
That's awesome.
And, do something that you don't know if you can do. And then after being in Minnesota for a few years, it was like I started to get interviewed, 3 or 4 other places, and realized like this is really what the passion I have for it.
That's awesome.
Did you know somebody was Shapiro? Had he been there in Cleveland?
Shapiro was the general manager in Cleveland and gave me my first job.
Oh wow!
So that was where
you got to Toronto, but you're only Toronto for 1 year.
One year, and then Derek Falvey, who had been in Cleveland as like an intern when I was there, ended up taking the president of baseball ops job. They needed Joe Vavra left and went with Grady to Detroit, and Kevin Cash, actually. I mean, it shows you things full circle.
Yeah.
He called Derek Falvey and said, hey, I got somebody I think I could recommend. Went in, interviewed for the job. I mean, very intimidating. I had never met Paul Molitor, Hall of Famer. And if you're around Molly at all, and I love Molly, he's been very good to me. He's extremely stoic. He's extremely professional. So I sit down in his office in Minnesota, and we go through this interview. And, here I am, a kid that grew up 40 minutes from Milwaukee, sitting with the Hall of Famer. And he's asking me questions. And to be able to work with him for a year was outstanding because I had never been around a Hall of Famer that much. And one of the beautiful things about Paul Molitor is his respect and love for the game is so much in the way he prepared. Like the last thing, and it happened one time, the last thing I ever wanted during the game was for him to look at me as a bench coach and say like, hey, what do you got on this? And I didn't have the information. And it happened to me one time. And like, from there on out,
that's the one time you remember.
Yeah, and I was over prepared for every situation, conversation, but being around him, just watching how he watched the game, and the one thing that really stood out is watching the reverence. You talk about like the passion of the game, the reverence that he had for the game, that he had for like the Hall of Fame, for the people that he played with. I mean, I can remember the first time I ever got to manage was in Boston. He went to the Hall of Fame weekend. And he called me to check and make sure everything was going well. And I said, how you doing? And he's like, I'm playing golf with Robin and George. And I'm like,
jeez.
Okay. There you go.
All right.
Okay.
No big deal.
That seems right.
No problem. That was just 1 year with him.
Yeah,
though.
1 year. And then he got let go. And Rocco Baldelli, my really close friend, got the job. It came down to him and I.
Oh, my God. I didn't know that.
And he got the job and decided to stay on the staff. And it was the best thing I did.
Where had Rocco been?
Rocco had been in Tampa. He was in Tampa. We worked in – I actually coached him in Tampa the last year of his career, and then he was on the staff in Tampa.
So Rocco and
Rocco
you –
was my last year was in Tampa. Rocco was great to me.
Yeah.
Because they wanted me to move around the diamond and catch, and they had me in the outfield for some unknown reason. But he treated me like I was an all-star, a gold glover. It was incredible. I was like, this guy's outstanding.
Phenomenal mind. Totally opposite personality of mine. I mean, he's
Well, it's interesting you'd say that.
I feel like you guys would.
I would have
pair.
had the exact, not knowing.
I'm getting
him,
dominated by this lighter, by the way.
Not.
There it goes.
Not knowing him at all, but watching interviews, listening to how he interacts with media and interacts with you, I would think that you two were very close in terms of personality.
We were very different in terms of personality.
Kind of like you and Donnie.
Yeah,
right?
it's very much like Donnie and I.
He's very similar to Donnie.
Donnie is very similar to Rocco.
Huh.
Very similar to Rocco. I don't know if he's as happy all the time.
Yeah.
Donnie's the happiest human being alive.
Donnie kind of bounces through life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So, Shelty, what is the thing that surprises you most then about being a manager that you did not expect when you thought I could do this?
It's not the baseball. It's all the other stuff. You know, I mean, you've been in my office.
Well, I've talked to him about this.
I say that to people all the time.
I am amazed at, and I don't know what it was like, because I guess I didn't pay enough attention 30 years ago. And maybe it's because of social media, and maybe there's more interest now. I don't know what it is, but the amount of time involved in literally managing people, not just the players, everything that goes on. It is like Grand Central Station, his office. I don't know how somebody does it.
Well, I think. Go ahead.
No, go through a day. And I think, like, what time do you get to the field? Like, and especially day one of a series. Because I think that's the one that blows people away.
Yeah, I get to the field. I mean, honestly, I get to the field, especially if my family's not here, 10:30, 11 o'clock.
For a 6:40 game.
6:40 game.
Jeez.
You know, we'll have a cup of coffee. First day of the series, you know, you're going through all the information. I think the one thing I got from my dad, I inherited from my dad, is I love to make lists of like things I'm going to do during the day.
Oh.
Those go out the window when you're managing, because you can have a list of like 10 things.
And it all changes?
It all changes throughout the day because, you know, there may be an injury, performance may come in, medical may come in, one of your coaches may have something, players, excuse me. So there's always something going on within the day that you have to discuss. And the one thing that I kind of pride myself on, and Brownie, you're around me a lot, is like, my door is open. It's not that policy.
I can
like,
contest to that.
Yeah.
Every time I'm over there,
Yeah.
it's open, unless it's real talk.
Right. And but I mean, if so, I want to have that communication. And when you start that, your first year, your first 2 years, then you can't ever change from that, because then it's like, oh, you change from that, you're not accessible, you know. So I think that's really important to me. Probably at times a fault of mine. I need to push people, you know, out of my office. But I mean, I enjoy, like, you come in every day, and it's either you or Joe, and to me, that's not just part of the job. Like, I enjoy talking the game with you, and sometimes you'll sit in there for 15, 20 minutes, and we'll talk through different things that are going on, or, you know, things that are going on in our lives, or so I enjoy that part of it.
But it's, again, you know, it's one guy. There are so many people and so many things that you have to take care of at the course of the day, not the least of which is the media.
Well, and filtering that. Talk about 10:30, you go in, Joe goes in, let's say Walk goes in,
but we're
and
just one group. Now,
there's so many aspects.
And what has changed in 30 years, I'm sure, is the fact that a manager talks to the media before and after every game, with few exceptions, maybe an afternoon game.
Don't forget his radio show and all the other things he has to do.
I wonder, does that ever get tiresome?
Sometimes, depending on how you're playing it.
Well, yeah, sure.
But yeah, I don't know. I think, I mean, I actually enjoy that part of the job. I enjoy the engagement. I enjoy talking to you guys.
It seems like it makes you think.
Yeah, it does. It gives me process within the day. It gives me different perspectives of things that are going on. So I really don't look at that as, you know, I know some guys don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't dislike it. I enjoy the engagement. I mean, I wouldn't do this if I didn't.
That's right.
You know, didn't enjoy the different parts of it, because I think you get a different perspective. I mean, one of the things, honestly, over the last probably 3 years that means a ton to me is Sunday mornings when Bob Walk works, he'll come and sit in my office and have a cup of coffee with me and talk to me about what he sees, or talks to me about the game. We talk about Leland a lot, you know. But
that's awesome.
Like, it's 15 minutes and Walkie's beautiful. Like, I tell him he's my favorite number 17, you know, of all time with the Pirates. But he he's like, I mean, this is a guy that I grew up watching and respect, not only the way he played, but his broadcasting career. And he's like, hey, I don't want to take up your time. And I'm enjoying it as much as he is.
So great.
Yeah.
I am also fascinated by the game. So I'm old, and I've been around a lot of managers and coaches at different sports. I was really close to Marv Levy when he was the coach of the Buffalo Bills, still consider him a friend. And I was fascinated every day when he would meet the media, and I'd be listening, I still do this today, to watch, because I know some things that the media doesn't. I just happen to know.
Right.
And I'm fascinated to know how a manager or a coach handles it. And to watch, and I'm wondering, are you a good poker player, do you think? Because you have to have a poker face on so many things.
Well, I would ask you. You know a lot of things that I probably don't talk about.
Yeah, but I don't. But I think.
So do I sell it?
You do, but I think I'm aware of it too. So it's that song and dance. It's that game that you play.
Right.
I would say you're articulate at it. You know what I mean? You're very good at.
Yeah.
Not overstepping the line.
Me.
So like, you don't let your emotion come out very often.
No,
every now and then you're human. You have to, but like you do a great job of kind of keeping the even kill, which gives you a good poker face.
Yeah, I'm saying, Shelton.
I would say you're probably better,
when I'm sitting there with you, and there are some things, and you'll stop and say we can't talk about this. Right. I mean, when I'm in the scrum with others, and I watch you, and yeah, you're really good at it. I mean, really, really good at it. But I'm fascinated because I feel like a question might be asked, and I'm thinking, man, if I'm Shelton right now, I'm going to grimace, I'm going to give a face, something's going to it's going to wrinkle, but you don't. You're stoic on purpose. You have to be.
100% on purpose. I think, I think that's important. I think I also, I hope I also come across as I realize like. Yeah, I mean, you guys are different because you're in-house and you do radio and you're around a lot. But I understand that the writers have a job to do, and there's times that they're going to be critical, and they're like I realize that and try to respect that.
You're respectful.
I think I've lost my cool 3 or 4 times in a couple of years, and that's going to happen. Like you said, I am human, and it happens. But overall, I think I hope I show the media people that I understand you have a job to do. I understand it's nothing personal. I understand at times there's going to be critiques, and that's part of the job.
Is one of the biggest parts of the job, Shelty, protecting players, whether you're a coach of a football team, basketball team, manager of a Major League Baseball team, you have to protect your players, don't you?
Publicly, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I think it's the biggest part.
Yeah.
I think it's the biggest part. And I think that's where in today's game, because of social media, because of people having opinions, that people don't take to that as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, before when it's just you're being interviewed and it's being written, but now, news is so instantaneous that I think everyone deserves to know everything that's going on. Like if Fort's playing for me and he's banged up and I don't play him, but I don't want the other manager to know he's banged up. So I get asked pregame like, okay, why didn't Fort play today? It's just a day off. And then they're like, well, he's, 4 for 5 off this guy. Well, they don't know that he came in and his back, doesn't feel great today, so I'm going to give him the day. And I also don't want the opposing manager to know, like, hey, one of my guys is banged up, and it's a situation where
because he knows in the 8th inning you're not going to pinch hit him.
He may not be available. That especially with bullpens, I think everyone wants to know, like, who's available tonight. What are you going to do? Well, I don't want to tell you that because, so we just played the Nationals, and we had the doubleheader yesterday, and Davey Martinez used 4 guys in both games.
Which was wild.
I
have not seen that.
Which was crazy to me, and I'm going to guess in 2 of the cases of their veterans, the veteran guys walked in and said,
no doubt,
hey, I'm available tonight. Yeah. But, you have to be very careful with, we couldn't have done that in this series. We just had 3 guys come off the IL. We have a couple young kids that we're going to protect.
And that's the value of a veteran player, too.
Exactly.
And I think people lose sight of that sometimes. It's like, yeah, he may not be putting the same numbers, but the value they bring sometimes gives you an ability as a manager that most people don't get.
Yeah, it's exponential. I mean, the value of that. But I'm not going to say, hey, Chapman's not available tonight because he threw 30 pitches yesterday and he's 37 or 38 years old and he walked in today and he's cranky. I'm not going to say that because I want him to think when he's got those right-handers up. Are those left-handers going to come in the game, or how he's going to do it?
Yeah.
So I try to be as professional and outward as possible, but I think you also, the biggest thing, going back to the guts of your question, Brownie, is like the 26 guys that I'm responsible for are more important to me than anything else. And if I'm going to catch heat for a decision I made or something that's happened publicly because I'm protecting one of my players, I would much rather me protect my players.
So did you learn that watching? Do you model yourself after anybody in particular over the years that you've worked with? Do you think in that respect?
I don't think specifically. I was very fortunate. The first two managers that I worked for, in Eric Wedge and Joe Madden, and that's not separating the other people I worked for, but they were so player center based in terms of protection that they would rather wear anything that went on with them than anybody else. And then I was really fortunate the year I worked in Toronto. I worked for John Gibbons. And the reason I said that is the year I was in Toronto, I mean, Batista, Tulowitzki, Donaldson, Russell Martin. I mean, we're talking superstars, like superstars. And the way that he handled those guys, it's a whole different animal. Dealing with those guys on a daily basis, when they're going to get their off days, how they're going to get their off days, where they hit in the order, you know. I mean, there was multiple MVPs in that room. So, and then multiple MVPs, some of them at the back end of their career were young guys like Justin Smoke were having career years, so it changes. So I was really fortunate watching Gibby, how he handled those conversations. So I was very fortunate, the people I was around.
That's another example. You can't have a blanket policy. You've got to have you've got to manage each player individually based on that.
100%. I mean, we have Andrew McCutcheon here. Kutch gets different treatment and deserves different treatment than a rookie that's come up. And I think that's the one thing you have to explain early on is like, okay, we're all the same here, but we're not. Right. You know, one of the first conversations in spring training, this may sound really stupid, but one of the first things I say is like, when you park in the parking lot at Pirate City or at Lecom, if you're a rookie, you park farther away because the spot up front, that's Aroldis Chapman. That's Andrew McCutcheon. Like, they put their time in the league. They deserve that. So I don't want to see a guy that's got 4 days in the big leagues pull up and park next to where my spot is. That's where Kutch parks. That's where Chappie parks. That's the things. You get your time in the game and you get your respect. So you ask for the same respect like you get from Kutch or you get from Chap or those guys. But you have to treat people differently.
And to that point, I was in the era where that started to shift, where everybody started to blend together. Because used to, we policed ourselves. The manager kind of oversaw it, kind of stepped back. Now you have to get a little bit more involved because the game is a lot younger. How have you been able to really deal with that? Because it is a giant extreme. You're talking about you have one of the youngest players in baseball, superstar. Then you have Kutch, who's 37. You have Chapman, who both could be in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
I mean, that's a big dynamic. It's huge.
Yeah, and I think my opinion on it is you're up front from day one. Like, this is how it goes. The time that you spend in the game, you respect. You know, the time that Kutch or that Chap have put in the game, there's respect there. Yep. You know, we had Martin Perez earlier in the year. There's respect there. You played 10 years in the big leagues. You did something. 8 years in the big leagues. Like, yeah, I mean, you get to that 10-year golden card mark. Like, that's something to be said. I think one of the situations we run into in our game today is guys are getting to the big leagues a lot quicker, number one. And guys this is a general statement, but guys have played so much travel baseball where they haven't been in a team environment that you have to make sure that they realize that there is respect for those people. I think football does, probably the best job of that in terms of the little bit I've been around, football teams. But in baseball, there's 2 points. Is number one, you have to respect that. And then number two, and I think CC Sabathia did this probably better than anybody I've ever been around, is the veteran guys also have to realize that those young rookies, they're part of the team, and they're going to help us win.
No doubt.
Paul Skeens is one of the youngest players in baseball. We need Paul Skeens to win.
Yes.
So we're not going to treat him different in that regard. He's our teammate. We need him to win. But also there has to be respect shown on both sides of the coin.
Well said with the travel ball era, because I'm in that realm and that age constantly, and it is a different animal. because they already think they've made it because they're getting treated like that.
Right.
And it's here, it's there, it's there. They're never really a part of a team, and the team they are a part of, they're from all over the country, especially if they're the best.
Yes.
So it is a different animal. He's exactly right when it comes to that because he's getting these youngsters that have never really been a part even of a high school. Some of these guys don't even play high school anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It is a wild change in baseball that most people don't know is coming. It's making the talent really grow, but man, it is changing the team aspect. And that's one thing I see constantly that has to be hard to manage because all the personalities, all the egos and everything, it's different.
Yeah, I think the things that we miss now in the game today are someone told me 2 years ago there's like a website where like, hey, we need a pitcher this weekend, and you can get a pitcher in your area, like for elite teams. Now, and you guys watch the game from up above, and the traditionalists and you, I definitely knows this. I think the other thing we miss, and you're involved in it for it, is because of it, we're missing fundamentals.
1,000.
You know,
they're chasing the big numbers.
It's right. We're chasing that, and then we're missing in the game little things that like we see it all the time on the bases.
Yeah.
No one in and I shouldn't say no one in go up at the definites, but like base running is not talked about anymore. Mm-hmm. And you see it widespread throughout the game in terms of like things that get screwed up, things that don't get screwed up. So little fundamental things are one of the things that are missing in the game, and it's missing for two reasons. Number one, because I don't think there is focused on, and then number two, guys get through the minor leagues so fast that it isn't an issue.
It becomes essentially, oftentimes, I hate to say it, but a showcase game, even at the big league level. Because of that, individuals are still showcasing their talents at times.
I would agree with that.
How about all your blowtorches there? That thing's about done. You got one right there, Fort.
Where is it? Oh,
right, yeah.
You would
Shelty,
have bit me, huh? We had that over there? Thank you, sir.
Everybody believes, most.
That's the real deal right there. You flip that
Yeah,
top off.
flip that lid. There we go.
Sophisticated, but not smart enough to use a
That's right.
cigar lighter.
Shelty, most everybody believes they can broadcast. It's part of the fun of watching sports. You sit there and you rip the announcers. I mean, even I still do it to this day. So I learned, took a while, that I had to have thick skin. What about as a manager, where the game, especially baseball, it's all about second guessing. Every one of us thinks we can manage that game. So what's it like to actually be the manager and knowing that everybody in the ballpark watching is second guessing just about every move you make?
I thought you were going to ask me if I wanted to broadcast. I was
No,
like, wow.
I know you could be a better broadcaster, and I know you think you could. You're probably
No, that's not true. That is not true. You have to have thick skin. I mean, and I think to the point you're right, is like every decision you make is critiqued. And I think the biggest thing about it is it's one of the great things about our game, which may be surprising for you to hear me say, is like everybody, the passion for our game, everybody thinks they know it.
Yeah.
So they want to second guess it. I think on the flip side of it is in the game there's 4 decisions every night, say, that can be second guess. Of those 4 decisions, there's probably 20 other ones that I made or did not make that nobody
talks about. Yeah.
I mean, perfect example.
Or they don't have the information that you have.
Right, perfect example. Last night's game. Keller pitches. Okay, Keller faces Gallo, runners at second and third and like the 6th, right, with 2 outs. Baracki's up. He hits a 3-run homer right there. Well, Baracki's up. Why didn't you? Well, because I trust Mitch there. You understand the execution. It was a move that was not made. No one probably thought about, but it's something we debated in our dugout. Are we going to let Mitch go? How's Mitch's stuff tonight? It's really good. Okay, the cutter's going to work here. We know we're going to get it. Now, I will tell you, he threw a cutter that damned him, and off the bat looked a little hot. I was like, oh, here we go.
It gave you that. Boom, 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 boom.
Right, but there's a ton of decisions every night that can be second guessed, and I understand that. And then there's certain things that you do and that are second guessed, and I think I am probably as critical about myself as anybody. And some of them I'm like, yeah, I wish I would have done different. And there's other ones I'm like, no, this. To your point, I had all this information. This is what I thought, and it may not work out.
Mm-hmm.
You go back to the Chuck Kenner quote that I love and I've learned from you. I mean, that quote, I think, is.
What is that quote, Brown?
He said he never, ever made a wrong decision, ever, as a manager. That's the way he believed it, and he said that. He said, now, I put the player in the position I think he will succeed, and sometimes it doesn't work out, but I made the right decision. So, and I think that managers, I guess we all have to have that kind of confidence level, too, within ourselves as well. I mean, you have to be confident enough,
Right,
else you're not going to be a manager.
Well, he's the only person that can.
Right.
Yeah,
You think,
right.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Well, and the funny thing is, like, I don't know how you guys interpret that, but I interpret that as like, I trust my players.
Right, that's exactly right. That's what Chuck meant by it more than anything.
I trust my players.
Yeah.
So if I'm putting you in that position,
Right.
if I'm pinch hitting you or leaving you in to face another hitter doing that, then I'm showing the faith in that player. Right. And then there's other times, very candidly, like you make decisions. I made a decision earlier in the year with Marco Gonzalez, who's not here anymore, and left him in probably a situation where it wasn't the best advantage matchup. The numbers would tell you it wasn't, but it was his second start in the big leagues for me as the manager, and he's a veteran guy, and I'm showing trust in him that I got his back. So, like, I have to make those decisions, too, that can sometimes be critiqued, that, you know, it's about the player-manager relationship. It's about the communication. It's about showing faith in that person, because at the end of it, I think as the manager, I'm going to get that back.
So we've seen that with you and how your relationship has grown with Mitch Keller. That's a great example because you started to take the reins off of Keller. You would, over the last couple of years, start to give him that extra batter, extra inning. And it seemed to me that you were doing that you wanted Mitch to know that I have faith in you. And so that next time he goes out, whether he succeeded or not, he's going to have that confidence that the manager had in me.
100%. And I think that is earned by a player, and that relationship develops. And it's also an easier conversation where the day before the All-Star break this year, I pulled him after 4 in Chicago when he was not sharp, and we're going into a 4-day break, and I got a full bullpen, and he's scuffling, and I'm like, all right, we're going to unload the bullpen, and we're going to throw all 6 guys and win a game. But when you have that conversation, even though, you know, in that situation, Mitch is not happy.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that he doesn't want to come out, you're able to have that relationship, and you've built up that trust of, like, you know, maybe there's a time or two I've given you an extra guy. But I think that goes back to the communication and the relationship that you build with players.
What about Shelty? So you've got this hitting coach background. So does it take a while to become almost knowledgeable about the pitching aspect of it, because you're so focused over the years on the hitting end of baseball?
He's a catcher. It all
oh,
comes
that's
back.
true. Okay, yeah, that's true.
Honestly, the best preparation I got for that, or I acquired for that, was the last year I was in Minnesota was Rocco's first year managing, and he was learning too. And the trust that we had in each other just as human beings and as friends, we sat through everything together and did everything together. So I kind of feel like that year I went by trial by fire. Now, the biggest difference, and I will tell you this, I felt trial by fire. So at times I was like, oh yeah, I got this figured out. I've been doing it with Rocco.
And then the game comes.
The big difference is it's not the game. It's like you make the decision, and then you got to stand in front of the microphone and answer for it.
Oh, there it is.
So there's the difference. The difference between when you're helping make a decision, and you feel like sometimes you even make the decision, but when you don't have to answer for it at the end of the day. And one of the best pieces of advice I got when I was in Tampa, Don Zimmer was a special assistant, was around every day, and at that time, Zim was however old and ornery and great and knew the game and would sit there and talk it. But one of the things he told me one day was like, listen, if you ever manage, do what you're going to do, be convicted in it, because you're the one that's going to have to answer to it. Don't ever let anybody else influence what you're going to do.
And you feel that as a player, right? Like you played. If your manager's not convicted and he doesn't have that knack, you know it.
Yeah,
right.
You feel it.
And I think that's the part of being a leader. That's something I never see. It seems like there's conviction. Like, hey, we're going to do this, and I see you moving around, talking to different hats, and trying to figure out what's the best way to go about it. And I love that.
I think your point is there, and I think this is something that I don't know if fans understand. players know. Players feel it.
Yep.
You know, it's that BS meter.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially,
You can't fake it. Yeah.
You can't fake it with
Yeah.
players.
Yeah.
They know, and it doesn't take them very long to figure out what's genuine and what's not genuine, and they will let you know.
Well, that's one of the things I told Shelty early on that I admired. One of the things I admired most about him is that because there are coaches and players and people in the game of baseball over the years that when things are going bad, and you people are miserable when you're losing, but you don't take it out on others, and that goes back to that respect factor. So Pirates may have won 8 in a row. I think you're the same person whether they lose 8 in a row or win 8 in a row. I think that's so important too because everybody sees that.
I try to be, and I think one of the reasons I try to be is because when you go through good times and bad times, the first thing a player is going to do, and we'll tell you this, they're going to watch how the manager responds, how he reacts, what he does. You know, it's just like defending a player on the field with an umpire. Like there's those things that come into play that the first person they're going to look to when things start to go south, they're going to turn and look at how the manager responds to it. And you have to, in my opinion, you have to try to stay the same as much as possible.
You mentioned being bench coach for Rocco and Molitor. As a bench coach, are you during the game at all debating a move? It's so fast. It's hard, I guess, to have even time to debate something. But did Rocco or Paul Molitor throw something your way? Say, well, I might make a move here. What do you think?
Yeah, Rocco a lot more than Molly did because Molly had been managing.
Yeah,
Rocco was in his first year, so it's so funny. I tell Donnie this all the time because Rocco talks the entire game. He's always talking. So
is that how he processes?
Yes, that's how he processes. So he's always asking questions. I'm the exact opposite. Like I don't talk a lot.
You're internal.
Yeah, and I'm internal. And Donnie talks a lot. So Donnie's always talking to me, and there's times I'm like, all right. So I think it's an interesting combination because it's just that's how I process things differently. Like I think to your point earlier, like when I need something, I'll go and ask. And a lot of things, we have planned out or we have talked through. But I think every manager, I mean, I don't know from different guys you played for in the dugout are different in different ways. When I was a bench coach, I was way more active. I was way more engaged with players during the game, talking about.
Well, is that a tough transition for you then?
And Donnie does that now, which is great.
But is that hard for you to all of a sudden change?
Not so much because I learned very quickly that there's so much going on, and you always have to be, when you're doing pitching, you're 2 innings ahead of where you're at, one side or negative or positive side. The pinch hitters, to some respect, are pretty much self-explanatory in terms of where you're at in the lineup, who you're going to hit, if somebody's banged up. But on the pitching side, that's where the constant thinking has to come involved. Something
I wanted to ask you, because Mitch Keller is a great example. I've never seen anyone have that much failure in the big leagues and come to light. You could see it coming, but it was like piece by piece by piece. As a manager, that has to bring so much value because you got to see a kid go through the ringer and you really know how he's going to handle just about any situation now, right? Because like the moving pieces, like you talked about Martinez, you talk about different guys coming in. You're dealing with all these personalities. How much value is that to have guys year in out? Like the relationship you probably have with Reynolds and Andy Haynes has with Reynolds. I know that for a fact because he's been here.
Right.
That value, you were talking about Tulo and all those guys. I was around those guys, but they had their people, and it's hard to gain that trust. And having that, like, I want to talk about, like, being here in a smaller market, sometimes it's tough to get that trust, get that buy-in really, really fast, especially with new guys. And that's one thing I've seen time and time again. It comes and it kind of flows, but it's very difficult because they have to have their maturation phase, right?
Yeah, and that's, I think, with us is you go through it with young players.
Yeah.
You go through it with having to, and I think Mitch is a rare case because he's been here the entire time.
Correct.
Mitch and Brian are the 2 guys that have been here since 20 with me. And, I mean, I've said this time and time again, like, Mitch is like one of my kids because I've seen the highs, the lows. I've seen the things that he's tried, what he has not tried, the failures, the successes.
And that brings a ton of value to you.
It's a ton of value to the relationships because you're extremely vulnerable, with each other because you've gone through it. And I think with those 2 guys specifically, the dynamic of that relationship is different. It's special. It's important because of the time spent together.
It's so awesome.
How long after a game, Shelty, do you carry a win or a loss?
How do you debrief? Maybe that's a better way to go about it. Because
And
I
how
know
long
you,
does it
I
take?
debrief, you debrief, but like not wash it away, but like you go through the game, you internalize it. Do you do that checklist?
Oh yeah. So the answer to the first question, it depends on the game. Wins, it's automatically you move on to the next day, and that's one of the things I've talked to Leland a ton about, because it's the expectation to win. Like we won. That's what we came here to do. Like, why do we need to dwell on this?
Right.
Losses, like yesterday was a doubleheader that we lost both games, and we didn't play well in the first one and did some things wrong, and the second one we lost late. That one was until about noon today.
Oh, wow.
That one was full. I think the thing that's probably that a lot of people don't know about me is I am way more critical of myself than anybody else can be. So whatever criticism that's publicly or that, I'm way harder on myself. Like I will walk through every decision, especially when I don't feel that they're right, of like what our process is, what we screwed up, what I screwed up, what I should have done differently. So, you talk about tough skin. The internal like review that I do on myself is way more critical than anybody else could say.
Do you go back and watch it, or do you just think about it in your mind?
I bet he doesn't have to.
I know.
Dude.
Baseball guys' memories are ridiculous.
No, I hear him.
All you guys.
There's not many managers that go up without notes with the media and kind of rerun or re-rack and at bat.
He'll do that the next day. I've got these notes here, and I'll say something. I forget who the player is. He goes, "Yeah, this guy in the other team, second inning, that happened, 2-1 pitch." How's he do that?
That's one thing I've loved about you from day one. Like you just rack, even during COVID, which was mind-boggling because, I know how hard COVID was. It was twice hard for you, maybe 10 times harder. And watching you kind of re-rack situations and all these different things, I'm like, this dude definitely was a catcher. But I could see you kind of processing as you're going and as you're walking it out of your mouth. I see your brain. You're like playing the game within the game. That's what. No surprise he said he's the most critical because that's how I walk through things too.
Yeah.
You walk backwards and walk forwards. And oh, okay.
Yeah. The only thing I really watch are pitches, because like you watch where a pitch is thrown, knowing where it was supposed to be executed. You know what the game plan is. So like I will rewatch, because watching from the side, you can only tell heights. Yeah. You can't tell in out. So there'll be times that like we make decisions and I'll go back and reflect on the decision and be like, damn, we didn't execute there. Like, where did we miss? And then sometimes it's, sometimes you didn't miss. Like, we'll go to the Arizona game where Josh Bell hit the homer off Chapman. It was 102 on the block away. And he's like, he executed it and he hit it out. Like, so there's like, you look back and be like, okay, we just got beat. But that's really the one thing that I'll go back and watch. And then the other thing that I will go back and watch from the high home is just fundamentals. Like if we screw up a cut or we screw up a throw or something like that, just trying to make sure that people are in the right spots, so then the next day we can at least teach off it.
Isn't that hard to do during a 162-game season with players? Because it's spring training is when all that happens, right?
Yeah, I think it's the hardest part of our game is you watch, especially like in football or basketball, like the review. Like I love watching the Hard Knocks on HBO. Only for the fact that I love like the defensive coordinator going in the room and talking to the group, or the offensive coordinator, and it's something I actually talked to Coach Tomlin about his process, and his response is, "Brother, you do it every day, man. Like we do it once a week." So you couldn't go to a major league player and say every day, like, "Hey, man, you screwed up these 3 things every day." You got to pick your spots. You got to, and I think that's one of the nuances of our game is that. Number one, we don't use film review probably the way everyone else does. And number two, I don't know if we can, because of the fact that every day you would find something negative about something that's going on in the game. And you can't live your world in a negative. Our game is already based on failure as it is. 3 of 10 times you hit 300 and they give you a plaque in Cooperstown. So there's so many factors that I think we have to pick our spots with players.
So I asked earlier if you probably don't have one particular moment that stands out, although
I do.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah, I and probably the best moment of my career was the night Longoria hit the walk-off.
Oh, of course.
The game 162. I mean, we were
That's
down.
cool.
That was throughout baseball. Stuff was going
that
on.
was like, and I actually have a Sports Illustrated placard at home that highlights minute by minute those 4 games of what happened. And I will tell you, my favorite part of that whole thing is that, number one, we came back from that deficit of being down by so many runs. I mean, if you want to look at a game that was managed, Joe managed that game. Joe Madden managed that game like a wizard. It was back when you could have 40 guys on your roster in September. So, like, everybody remembers the Dan Johnson homer with 0-2, 2 outs in the ninth to tie it. But what people don't remember is that Sam Fold pinch hit in the 7th for someone. Dan Johnson pinch hit for Dan Fold in the 9th for that. So, and Sammy walked in the 8th. But my favorite part of that whole moment is Boston and Baltimore played that night. And I learned 2 lessons that night, and I think you know the first one, is that Buck Showalter, the Orioles were out of it. He played that game like his team was in it. So what he did is he played the game out of the respect for everybody else that's involved in that game. Okay? So he played that game respecting the Rays because they were out of it, Boston was not. But he played his players. He played his guys because it had playoff implications. So that stands out to me. That's like a lesson you learn. The second thing is there was a rain delay in that game.
I didn't know.
And there is a Boston announcer that's talking to another Boston announcer that says, well, the one thing we know, because we were losing like 10-3 at the time or whatever it was, Tampa's going to lose and Boston's going to at least be a wild card. And you see the other announcer at that time, Longo hits the 3-run homer in the 8th, and you see her eyes light up because it's off camera, like, oh, God, this just got real.
Wow.
So that's the second. And then the third is Robert Andino got the hit in that game for Baltimore, okay, for that to go ahead. The next year in spring training, Tampa played Baltimore, first day of spring training. And Dino came to the plate, our entire bench, standing ovation.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
Outside of the dugout. He's getting in the box and he's looking over. Outside of the dugout, every single guy, standing ovation. Because that base hit and then Longo hitting the homer got us into the playoffs.
That's
so
incredible.
that night stands out. Now,
tell me baseball's not romantic.
yeah, I mean that in and of itself, and like I mean I can run you through that. I can run you through that entire night. I remember we got down early. We got down early in that game, and I remember, back in the day, hitting coach has to walk up to the cage. Well, the cage in Tampa is right by the walkway. I remember my wife walking into the game and looking at me like, we're down 7-0. I think we gave up 7 early, like, hey, I'm sorry. And, that's the beauty of this game. That's the beauty of everything that happens in baseball. And to your point, that's why it's romanticized. Like, that's
really
why
is.
it's important.
What about when someone comes in your office, hey, Shelty, I'm here, that moment, welcoming somebody like today, you had Cook.
Yeah.
He's making his major league debut. You get to put him in the lineup. You get to give that kid a hug and say, you've earned it. How does that feel?
That's the best part of my job. The best part of my job is that. Like, you see a kid that drove over from Toledo today and
after hitting a grand slam last night, which is outstanding.
Got in the car at
Incredible.
8 o'clock this morning, drove over. Hey, you're making your major league debut. You're at first base. You got 2 hours to get ready. You got to go out and take ground balls. You've never been on PNC Park before. So that there's nothing better than seeing the excitement of that. And on the flip side, the worst part is telling a guy like, hey, we're going to have to DFA you, or you're not going to make a club out of spring training. Because, like, I've sat in that chair, not at the major league level, but I've sat in that chair where it sometimes, like, you're ending someone's dream. You're ending, they got to call their wife. They got to call their kids. So the highs and lows of that. And usually when that happens, sometimes it's the same day. It's the same day of
Both
telling,
extremes?
Yeah,
Oh.
you get both extremes, and that's the part of the job that sucks.
What's the weirdest DFA or weirdest moment in your office, if you can say? You can go roundabout. You don't have to use names. Because I'll never forget one time I got called in the office. They're like, hey, what do you think? And they asked me, what do I think? because I'm coming off an injury. I'm like, I need to go to AAA. And I couldn't believe it came out of my mouth. But they were like, all right, we're going to send you to AAA. It's like I talked myself into going to AAA, but I really felt that in my heart, and it was the right thing to do, and it made my career go forward. Have you had anything like weird where someone's literally like owning it, or maybe they don't see it?
Well, we've had a couple in spring training when guys haven't made the team that their responses have been loud and vocal and, don't realize it. I think guys that have been around, they understand it. They understand, that there's a decision to be made. Younger guys are harder.
Yeah, because they don't have a reality.
They don't have the reality. And sometimes when you're doing it with a younger guy, they're performing. And it's like, okay, we got caught in a roster situation and you have options. And I think one of the things that I've learned throughout doing this, and I've told myself, is I'm extremely honest with the player. Like I think I learned that from being a hitting coach when that would happen to guys and then they would come in the cage and they would complain like, are you kidding me? This happened, this. And so what I learned through that is players want honesty. So sometimes if it's like, hey man, you got options. Like, sorry, you want it to be honest. Like you have options left. And until you're out of options, this is the way the situation in the game is.
I love that.
And sometimes, guys get DFA'd. It's like, listen, we ran out of roster spots. We need roster spots. We have 5 young players on our roster that we feel are going to be an important part of our future, and we're going to do it. And I actually had a player to me this year was like, Shelty, this sucks. I appreciate your honesty. He goes, I've been other places where they give me this roundabout, this, that. He goes, you were point blank. He's like, I'll play for you anytime. Like, I appreciate the honesty. So I think trying to be as honest as possible. Understand you have to protect the organization in certain, situations of what's going on, but players want honesty. They want black and white. And I think one of the things, and Ronnie, you've heard me say this before, is like, I tell all our players all the time, don't live in the gray area. The game is great, but like, if you have an answer or you have a question, I will give you the answer. But if you ask me the question, I'm going to give you an honest answer. I don't want you to go home at night and be pissed at your wife or mad at your kids or have a bad night. We've all been there. So I would rather you go home and be like, all right, at least I got an answer. Don't think it's the right answer, but I respect the fact that I got the right answer.
I love that.
Finally, Shelty, and can't thank you enough for doing this. Yeah. Hold my cutter.
And by the way, that really does go back to that hitting coach, because I don't think people realize how much you are the balance in between.
Oh, 100%.
Right? Because they're always coming to you.
Yeah.
And it's never just about the swing.
Oh, no, they want to complain about everything else.
Exactly.
What do you mean back
You're
to the hitting coach?
You're a psychologist. I mean, I think hitting coaches probably get beat up the most. It's why you don't see many guys stay longer than 3 or 4 years max, right? They turn over. When you said 5, I was like, wow.
Well, the average lifespan of a major league hitting coach is 1.5 years, which is unheard of.
Wow.
Because it's the first place to cast blame. It's the hardest job, because especially in today's world, everybody has their own hitting coach, and anybody that tells you they don't.
That's one question I really want to get into.
That's not true.
They
all have hitting coaches.
Everybody's got it. Whether it's
got a guy,
whether it's their dad, someone they played with, someone they hit with in high school. Everybody has a guy now. So the hitting coach is not only battling that, he's battling what was said there. He's battling, what the organization. So that's the biggest challenge right now, and that's where, like, at times they get blamed for things, and it's like, this isn't even my stuff. Like, So and I got that at the tail end of being a hitting coach.
Yeah, you got both versions.
And it's one of the things that, like, it sours you a the because it's like you're working your butt off, and then they come in and all of a sudden their hands are in a completely different spot, and you're like, the great story, like I had BJ Upton for a lot of years.
Wow.
Love Melvin, one of my favorite guys. But I always knew when Melvin's dad was in town. He'd walk in and he'd be like, hey,
that's great.
I want to do short bat work today. And I'm like,
here we go.
Why? He's like, I just think I should do it. I'm like, is your dad here? He's like, yeah. I'm like, all right. So it's great. I mean, his dad had 2 major league players that were very good players, but it's one of those things that, like, once you learn your guys, but it's the challenge of being a hitting coach.
But you have to kind of marry that.
You have to marry it. Yeah. You have to embrace it, because if Fort's my hitting coach and, you're my guy on the outside, you have to make sure that you at least know what's going on, because if not,
you can't shut him off from this guy.
You're not going to. And a lot of these guys are paid guys.
Yeah.
So,
And how many times even watching Longo hit, he was so talented that sometimes he would do some things. I'm like, what are you doing? But he's Longo, right? You're not going to say anything to him. If he's hitting, confidence is high, right? There's some weird stuff you're going to see in the cage. It's one of my favorite places to go and watch because you really learn a lot about a human being. And sometimes it's not going to make sense, but if it's confidence-based and it brings it up, it works. And that's the balance he has.
I'll give you a great Longo story. So when I was hitting coach, I was adamant. There's this drill where you stand behind the hitter. So the hitter's facing like Orion is, and you stand behind him and flip the ball, and they hit it. I'm like, this is the most worthless drill of all time. The ball's coming from a different angle, like whatever. So I was like, 100% dead set. This drill's terrible. Never doing this drill. Got to Tampa. No, actually didn't get to Tampa. Got the job in Tampa. Flew to Arizona to meet with Longo and Pat Burrell. You know, our best player, Evan Longoria. We get in the cage. He goes, "Hey, I like to do behind toss," and I'm like, "All right, we're gonna do behind toss.
We are never doing that. Worst drill.
This is the worst drill of all time." So it took till about midway through spring training. I'm like, "Why are we doing this?" And he explained it to me. I'm like, "All right, I understand that," but I was adamant. Like, this is a drill that I think has no purpose. But he was like, "Hey, we're going to do this drill." I'm like, "Yes, we are."
What's your favorite drill?
My favorite drill? I love, like, sit down, short, and if you can throw good BP, and I used to be able to before my arm got trashed, sit down really short and throw as hard as you can. Throw as hard as you can because there's no time to react. It was a one that when I was in Cleveland that we used to do a lot with Aaron Boone and Casey Blake. And you throw it as hard as you can and do it. And then the other one I like is the one where you put the net up and you have to hit, but not through flip. If you're really good, you can throw it. And if you throw it, it'll teach like where the angle of the bat goes.
By the way, whatever happened with you always get that the commercial
speed hitter, yeah.
What was that?
It was the speed hitter. It was a device that there's a gentleman that owns Reminisce Sports out of Colorado that he was friends with one of the Rays owners, and legitimately they were playing golf one day and he had this hitting device and he goes, "I think our hitting coach would do it." One of our owners in Tampa, the guy called me and we ended up doing it. And the funny thing about it is that it actually made me a little bit of money.
Well, yeah, the commercial was on all over the place.
But we were the first commercial to run on the MLB network. We were the actual first commercial.
Wow.
So the reason it's on so much is that back then they just started and they had like 4 commercials and that was one of them. And I had black hair at the time.
Is it still on? Do you ever see it?
You
still get residuals? What's
no, not anymore. But it developed good relationships. It was so funny because there were guys that like would make fun of me for doing it, and then they're like, "Hey man, can I get one of those for my kid?" Or
of course,
can I get a couple of those? And so yeah.
I got one last question. Bucket list of managing. Like, what are the bucket list things you want to do? Like, obviously, win a World Series.
Win a World Series, like
obviously,
yeah.
But like some of the other things that you would love to hit milestone wise as a manager, because you're really young as a manager, so you have a lot of time.
I think just win here. I mean, like I think to see the passion of the fans, to see the Clemente Bridge packed in black and gold, turn all black and do that. Like I think, and I think we're on our way. I know we've gone through a tough stretch, but we have such a good young core of pitching that, and that's what's going to win. So that's the passion. I mean, you want to win a World Series, you want your players to be able to feel that. So I really like, in terms of like individual accomplishments, none of that matters without, being able to. There's nothing greater than pour champagne on the guys you're with since February 12th.
I love that.
Shelton, I have one more. Fascinating to talk to people that were not really aware of the city and the baseball passion. American League people just weren't. Now you're an American Leaguer. You come to Pittsburgh. Has it surprised you, that passion, by the way?
Yeah, I think
were you unaware of it? I guess
you're not. You're not aware of it. I'd only been here twice as an opposing coach. One time was opening day.
Oh,
but it was open. I mean, you guys remember this? It was Colin Moran grand slam.
Yep.
Fernando Rodney catching snow in his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Packed house. was about 14 degrees, snowed. So like when you're in the American League, you don't understand it as much. And then when I got the job and started to, talk to people about it, and the fact that being in Cleveland, which is so close, which is a passionate fan base, and having been there during playoff years, you start to feel it a little bit. It's got that Midwest type passion to it, which is I think is what separates it. And then honestly, the thing that stood out the most is I don't think people realize the history of this organization.
That blew me away.
The number of Hall of Famers. Yeah. Like I used to play this game with David Price every time we'd go to ballparks. Is you look up at the retired numbers and we'd play like, all right, who are the retired numbers? Because you go to Cincinnati and they're up, but they don't have the names.
Yes.
So we would play
That's great.
that game all the time during, when you're a hitting coach, you play games with starting pitchers doing that. But then you start to talk about, the history of the organization. And that's where the love for Clemente, that's where the passion for us being able to, proposing to Major League Baseball, wearing 21 and getting that done with the Clemente brothers. That's where it came from. And then, my relationship with Leland, the way it's grown, throughout the years, if you can get it from anybody, you get it from him.
I was going to ask you about the 21 thing. That is a pretty neat.
It's probably my
right?
coolest accomplishment. You asked me about personal.
Yeah.
That's my coolest personal accomplishment. The fact that, it was my idea, and I don't mean that to sound egotistical. It was my idea. I went to Brian Stroh, our, AGM was like, and he's like, I don't know how we're going to get this done. He called the league.
And what was the idea? What was your thought?
That we wear 21 on
Clemente Day.
We're able to wear number 21 on Clemente Day and show off the pride. And we talked to Major League Baseball, and Major League Baseball said, okay, but you have to get the blessing of the brothers. And so, talking to Junior and Luis, like having a conference call with them and then continued conference call and why I wanted to do it and why it was a passion. And then after we were able to do it, I think Yachty did a great thing. Yachty just said, like, I'm wearing it. Like, I'm wearing it. And now all the Puerto Rican players being able to do it. And there was an impactful year that first year. Joey Cora, who used to work for us, because he was the first Puerto Rican to wear 21 since Clemente, was like, hey, Yachty wants to talk to you in the tunnel. We're playing them. And I'm like, why? And he's like, he just wants to talk to you. And he met me in the tunnel, gave me a signed jersey.
Wow.
How much he thanks me about it. We were just in Cleveland. Carlos Baerga pulled me aside and was like, you have no idea. Like, so that is something, like, I'm not Puerto Rican, but culturally what that's meant to not only
but you caused a movement.
The people
so cool.
in Pittsburgh, but like to the Puerto Rican community, like that's extremely touching. I mean, you guys know how important the museum is to me, and Ali's a board member there, but like that is something that I'm proud of, and something that I think regardless of anything that'll be something about my time in Pittsburgh.
I asked you if you were surprised about the passion of Pittsburgh baseball fans. I guess you're not surprised that you always thought that Hold My Cutter was the best podcast, but now
it's without a doubt. I mean, you get to drink coffee.
Yeah.
You get to smoke
from
cigars.
Kentucky.
From Kentucky.
And talk ball.
Yeah.
Talk
I mean,
ball.
you get this cool mug that Bob Walk actually drank out of also. And I get to sit and
it's like the Holy Grail.
It is the Holy Grail.
Just get sit and
Shelton,
talk to you guys.
can't thank you enough.
Cheers.
I know how
Thank you,
busy
sir.
you are.
Thank you
and
very
this is
much.
great.
No, this was great. I appreciate it.
Thanks to Derek Shelton. Hope he'll be back on, and hope you'll be back. And by the way, how do people get a hold of Hold My Cutter? Subscribe,
comment, ask questions, whatever you want. Let's go.
Thanks to Burn by Rocky Patel, and thank you for watching Hold My Cutter.